Hi, everyone. I am Tara, aka Spirit Mother, and I would like to welcome you all back to my channel on YouTube. I'm Spirit to Spirit, Teachings of Going Within Self on TikTok, 1974 Enlightened Soul, and I'm also live on my Facebook. If you're not familiar with my channel, I usually recommend or suggest that people go and read the description on my YouTube channel to get a better understanding of what it is that I bring forward. So check the description. It would be Spirit to Spirit. Today, I'm in to talk about legal age of sexual consent. Okay, there's a lot of that happening right now, and it's a part of should there be an age restriction with regards to uh, legal age for consent. Okay, what brought that to my attention today is um, I was scrolling through TikTok and 111 on the rumors. I said that scrolling through TikTok, and I come across a thing with regards to when Prince Charles and Princess Diane's relationship started. Okay, a lot of people look up to these ones. Okay, you look up to the monarchy, and if you don't like what I have to say, well, I guess you might want to think about it for a while, okay? Because are they not supposed to be the ones setting the example for the people, okay? Now, when I read this article, I went to somebody, and what was said to me was, oh, well, they didn't know, like, that was not frowned upon then. I have an article because, we're talking about the British monarchy. I'm going to use myself and pictures of myself as an example, okay? Because I've heard many people um, Prince Charles was 29 when he met Diana, and she was 16. She was still a young teenage girl, and he was a grown ass man in a high position. Okay, if you don't think there's something wrong with that, then I'm going to say you really need to shake your head. People are talking about the Diddy thing. You're talking about the Epstein thing. Seriously, think about it. How is that any fucking different? Okay, I'm going to play the article so you can hear it. Oh, wrong thing. Just one sec. Sorry. Okay. So where is it? Okay. Everyone can hear this. And I want you all to keep in mind the part of Prince Andrew. And somebody who got frustrated with me because I brought this to their attention. They said about some of the monarchy being on the list for these whole high profile places. But they get irritated with me because I brought this up and said, that's actually pretty sad. You're supposed to be setting an example, and they ain't setting an example because he was damn near 30 and she was 16. So she was still a child. Because you're not considered an adult till you're 18, 19, correct? So I'm going to play this, and then I'm going to read something. Oh, shit. I myself, I don't follow the monarchy. But when stuff like this comes to my attention, that's spirit's way of saying, can you bring it to the attention of the people? Because it's so turned away from and it's not put out there. But this to me is child molestation. It's a form of trafficking, whether people want to believe that or not. This was in the late 70s. And people think that, oh, well, back then it was normal. Well, it should never have been normal because you're a fucking adult. There should be an age restriction like that of when it then becomes more of a statutory rape molestation. And some people don't like what I have to say, but have you been raped? Have you been molested? Have you been sexually assaulted? Whether you're a child, a teenager, a young adult, or whether you're like older. People say age don't matter. Well, you know, when you're dealing with a 29-year-old and a 16-year-old, your fucking right age matters. To me, you just wrote, sounds like true love then. If you think 29 and 16 should be actual true love, there's something wrong there. Because at 16, she's still a child. No, it's not just a number when you're looking at a 29-year-old and a 16-year-old. That would be the same as fucking a child like that. You got that? That's what's wrong with the world. It ain't about an age. If they're much older. When I got with my ex-husband, I was 25 and he was 40. I was well and old enough to know. But a 16-year-old, and you know what? I'm going to be honest, that had to do with the parents too, because the parents should have known better also. Actually, no, I'm not very wrong. Maybe you're very in the wrong frame of mind if you're thinking that's okay. Because to me, it's actually disgusting and despicable. Because you're fucking a child. People are saying about what Diddy was doing, what these actors were doing. How's it any fucking different for the monarchy? What? Because they sit on a fucking throne and have like millions and billions of dollars? Could they? You say they could be mature, but up until the age of 25, their brain is still fucking developing. Their body is still developing. Don't believe me? You might want to look it up. Oh, yeah. Well, if you're 17, you are not welcome in my channel because this is for 18 and over. So go right back out. Doesn't matter. It's still a child. Because the legal age for being said to be an adult is 18. And when it's not judging, it's using the heart and saying, that's pretty fucked up. Because that's actually abuse of authority. It's using your authority. It's using your ranking. Oh yeah, I've matured. Long time ago. And the reason why I ended up maturing so fast is because I was raped at 9. So stick that in your pipe and smoke it. Well, that's your opinion. I'll tell you right now, I had a guy contact me on POF one time and asked me if I wanted to be with him to fuck a 14-year-old, and he was 34. But 14 was of legal age? Seriously. It's not just him. People, did you think it was okay for Andrew to be doing it? How would you feel if it was your child? Oh, wait, you've already said that it would be okay. Because it's not okay. It's a grown-ass man. Girls at that age haven't even developed their breasts. I'm fucking 50 and I still ain't got no breasts, but I'm a sight fucking older too. Because I would have to ask, are you a much older man having sex with a teenager, a younger child? Because they're still a child. No matter how mature you fucking think they are. It still has an impact on them. And that's the sad part. I was this age and I had a baby. But the guy, he was 3 years older than me and he had just turned 18 and they were going to charge him for statutory rape. There's a big difference. No, I'm not very wrong. I'd hazard to say that, maybe you support what Diddy was doing. Diddying the kids. Or Andrew diddying the kids. These are people that are supposed to, your kids look up to them, and that's the sad part. Is what it is. A 21-year-old had sex. If you think that, that's sad. That would be the age that Diana would have been. Still a younger child. See, the thing is, it would be different if it happened to your child, or, are you going to sell your child? Because in days before, highest bidder got them, right? And I have to say, like, when you say that, oh, that's okay. No, it's not. And I don't give a shit what any legal age say, like, and anybody under 18, because they can be coerced, groomed, as some call it. Age of consent reform in the United Kingdom. Restrictions on sexual activity involving minors on the United Kingdom and its predecessors have existed since medieval times. During 1970s, there was some political advocacy in favor of significantly reducing the age of consent, supported by various youth liberation organizations and mostly by members of the Pedophilia Information Exchange. Did you get that? Meanwhile, over a similar time period, the unequal age of consent for straight and gay young people was campaigned against by the LGBT rights movement. More recently, arguments have been occasionally been made in favor of reducing the age of consent, generally to an earlier point in adolescence. Now, do you guys do you understand? I have you laugh. You're sad and you need some healing. Don't care if you like me. That is so wrong. And people wonder why there's so much backlash on the community. And I'm not saying it's everyone in that community. Legal history. In 1275, the first age of consent was set in England at age 12. So a fucking 35-year-old man could have sex with a girl at the age of 12 and it'd be fine. That's age 12. Statute Westminster. In 1875, the Offenses Against the Person Act raised the age to 13 in Great Britain and Ireland. And 10 years later, the Criminal Law Amendment Act 1885 raised it to 16. In 2017, a bill was raising the age of consent in Great Britain and Ireland from 16 to 17 was defeated by only one vote. And you know, these people are the ones that are having sex with your minor children, with your young children, with your young teenage children who are still in school. In 1950, the Parliament of Northern Ireland passed the Children and Young Persons Act, which successfully raised the age of consent to 17. However, in 2008, this enactment was reversed by the Sexual Offences Northern Ireland Order 2008, which made the age of consent in Northern Ireland to 16. Regardless of gender or sexual orientation. The reason given for this change being made was to bring the age of consent into line with the rest of the United Kingdom. The criminal justice minister, Paul Goggins, said there was no compelling reason for the age to be different in Northern Ireland. Do we not have a lot of people talking about like people in authority having intercourse or sexual activities with young people? It's happening a lot within your systems. Kids are taking people's children, putting them in homes where those children are being raped, molested, sexually assaulted, not only by the people in the home, but by people who are being brought in the home. The male homosexual age of consent in the England and Wales was set at 21 in the Sexual Offense Act 1967. So why was it for like homosexual for 21, but for straight young children, it was 12, 13, 16? Don't believe me that the maturity level doesn't get the body growth and the mental capacity doesn't finish until it's 25. You might want to do your homework. You're too busy learning all the bullshit that they teach you in school. But they don't teach you about that stuff, do they? They'll teach you sex education. For consenting adults in private, following the recommendations of the Wolfender Report. In 1980, the Criminal Justice Scotland Act 1980 legislates homosexual acts at age 21. Seriously, how is homosexual acts any different than straight acts? The homosexual age of consent was then lowered to 18. It's an adult, right? 18, you're an adult. At 16, you cannot sign a contract. You know, at 16, you had to have your parents' signature to get married. The criminal justice, they lowered to 18 in the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act in 1994, and finally lowered to 16, equalizing it with the heterosexual age of consent in England and Wales and Scotland in the Sexual Offences Amendment Act 2000. Now you think about when they said about Roman times, okay, like you talk about the church and stuff like that, taking these children downstairs and grooming. Seriously. Currently, the age of consent for penetrative sex, oral sex, and mutual masturbation in the United Kingdom is 16 years. Relevant legislation is devolved, meaning that it is up to each UK nation to set their age of consent. However, each nation has set the relevant legal age at 16 under the Sexual Offense Act 2003 in England and Wales, the Sexual Offense Scotland Act 2009 in Scotland, and the Sexual Offense Northern Ireland Order 2008 in Northern Ireland. Now, you have a 16, okay, you people say about maturity, okay? But see, the thing is, they're not just having intercourse, sex relations with, you know, what you class as mature for being 16. They think it's okay to have sex with ones that are not mentally developed. This means that in each UK nation, if an individual is to have sex with someone 15 or less, then they may be charged with a criminal offense. Maybe. Similarly, the Sexual Offense Amendment Act 2000 prohibits someone in a position of trust from performing sexual acts with somebody who cannot consent, which includes minors and very vulnerable people. And that's what I just got done saying. But you know, the one that said, "Oh, age don't matter," you come in and you tell me no. Well, you know, the true ones that are going to change it are the ones that stand up and stop it from happening. And that's up to the parents. In 1970s, the decriminalization of sex between men over the age of 21 convinced some pedophilias that they might soon be able to change the law of social attitudes to allow for their desires to have sex with children. The Pedophilia Information Exchange was an organization with around 300 members, which used its link inside government and the civil liberties movement to lobby for the decriminalization of sex with children as young as the age of 4. Arguments around relaxing age of consent laws relating to adolescents in particular did also have a wider reach. Sociologist Matthew Waitz, author of The Age of Consent, Young People, Sexuality, and Citizenship, observed that. By the mid-1970s, the case for a lower minimum age for all was finding wider support, with questions being posed concerning the merits of lowering the legal age for male-female sexual behavior, not only within grassroots sexual movements, but also within religious organizations and liberty intellectual circles. Significant sections of legal opinion in the political mainstream, including prominent campaigners for children's interest and sexual health, support at least some selective decriminalization of sexual activity between young people under 18. In August 1971, young members of the Gay Liberation Front organized a public rally in London to protest at the age of consent for gay men. In April 1972, the Society of Friends Social Responsibility Council, a Quaker conference, passed a resolution in favor of lowering the age of consent in Britain from 16 to 14. Seriously. In July of that year, Dr. John Robertson, Dean of Trinity College, Cambridge, and chair of the UK Sexual Law Reform Society, defended an age of consent of 14 in a lecture in the Methodist conference. These are people of power. Seriously. That's how sad it is. Because I know there's a lot of people that are suffering from sexual trauma, from being raped. They didn't give consent, but the other person would say, well, they were of age. They were of age, but they didn't give consent, right? Or you think they gave consent because, they felt intimidated. Lowering the age of consent to 14, with the requirement that below the age of 18, the burden of proof that consent for sexual activities between the parties existed would be the responsibility of the older participant. I just got done saying that before I read about that. And they just said consent to 14 with the requirement that below the age of 18, the burden of proof that consent for sexual activities between the parties existed would be the responsibility of the older participant. But the ones that are doing it are the ones that are, supposed to be authority figures in power. So anyone that defends or thinks it's okay that a 30-year-old, damn near 30-year-old man was all in the right for having intercourse with a 16-year-old. In March 1976, the National Council for Civil Liberties, NCCL, called for an equal age of consent of 14 or 10 in Britain. Seriously, people. Seriously. And you wonder why your children are fucked up. The submission to the Criminal Law Revision Committee generated extensive newspaper coverage. While the report recognized the merits of abolishing the age of consent, it proposed returning prohibition on sex under the age of 14 as a compromise with public attitudes. Who's got the fucking attitude of having sex with 14-year-olds, with 12-year-olds, with 10-year-olds, with 4-year-olds? What the fuck? Setting that although it is both logical and consistent with modern knowledge about child development to suggest that the age of consent should be abolished, we fear that given the present state of public attitudes on this topic, it will not be politically possible to abolish the age of consent. They also argue that childhood sexual experiences willingly engage in with an adult result in no indefensible damage, and suggested that who was a legal officer for the NCCL at the time before becoming an NP in 1982. Harman denies ever supporting the age of consent being lowered to 10 and claimed that right-wing newspapers, the Daily Mail and the Telegraph, had tried to make her guilty by association with fringe groups that had previously been connected to the NCCL. See, these are things that Spirit brings to my attention. Dice la torre que ata. See, it was never okay. But people of authority, the ones that like to make the laws and the rules, they make it to benefit their lust. More recent arguments. By the end of the 20th century, those in favor of reducing the age of consent faster were pointing to faster physical development and increasing levels of sexual activity among adolescents as reasoning. Okay, think of it this way. The hormones that they're putting in your children's food, that's why they're developing a lot faster. Instead of developing the way they're supposed to be. They're putting hormones to cause young girls to have bigger breasts, to become more sexually active. I witnessed a 4-year-old doing motions of sexual activity. But, they'll say, well, that's normal. No, it's not. More generally, in academic work, particularly in sociology, writing on human sexual behavior debated prohibitions on sexual activity involving children. Although he does not favor total abortion, Frantz Fanon, a British liberal humanist, also influenced by the historical context of the issue, emphasized the fact that children are sexual beings, concluding that this in itself makes legal prohibition unfair. Seriously. I talked to a woman the other day, and she shared something with me, and all she could do was cry and wonder why her parents allowed her to go with a 26-year-old man, and she was 15. She didn't want to go. And it's not a breach of trust. It's explaining how often this happens, and that's sad. Because you're fucking up your children. You're allowing a system Marhad Sawyer, British journalist, specialized in music and youth culture, suggested that we have sexual feelings from a very early age, considering that sex is natural behavior, not in children. Their minds are still developing. She favored lowering the age of consent to 10 in the UK, while labeling the criminalization of sexual activity under the age of 16 as laughably unrealistic. In November 2013, a leading public health expert of Faculty of Public Health President Professor John Ashton called for the age of consent to be lowered to 15. He said that the current legal limit prevented sexually active younger teenagers from getting support for issues of disease and contraception. Do I believe that parents should be talking with their children? Yes, I do. Do I believe that schools should be teaching it at the age they are? What are you teaching? Here's some condoms. You're promoting sex? Seriously? No wonder people want to take their kids out of school. But who wants to keep them in? The ones who want to groom your children. Issues of disease and contraception. Well, it's the adult that's going to get the disease. I actually had a teacher make me extremely uncomfortable. They're an authority figure. But if a child was to tell their parents or another person within the school, what would happen? They'd believe the adult, right? That's the sad part. Because you say that your kids are lying? No. The biggest majority of the time, it's the adults that are lying. He said that the official figures indicated as many as a third of all 14 and 15-year-olds are having sex in Britain, and said that a nationwide debate was needed to discuss the benefits of lowering the present age of consent of 16. The call was rejected by the Prime Minister David Cameron and then Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg the same year. Do you notice, like, these are people in authority? They're the people that your children are supposed to be looking up to. They say like young children, young teenagers, okay? There's a difference of them having sex with other younger teenagers as opposed to having sex with a grown-ass fucking adult, whether you're a man or a woman or whatever gender you want to say you are. And I'm not picking sides. Actually, I am. I'm choosing the children and what's in the best interest of a child. Because anyone that I've ever talked to, their problem was sexual offenses against them. And the same one that thought that, yeah, it was okay. They didn't like it too much when they were a young kid and it happened to them, right? Evidence from some of the groups who have advocated for lowering the age of consent have included known and convicted pedophiles within some of the organizations, for example, the Pedophilia Information Exchange. But you want to turn a blind eye and then blame your kids or blame a society when it's actually you who's responsible. Because you allow it to happen. Research by Jean Golding showed that by the early 2000s, puberty was occurring earlier than in the 1970s, with an average age of menstruation in girls now at 12 years and 10 months. And it's because of the hormones that are being put into everything. They're sterilizing but they're putting hormones into them to develop earlier. I was 11. I was very mature for my age, but as far as being mature enough to consent and know what I was consenting to, no. Compared to the average age of 14 for puberty in general, that was accepted as evidence by the Private Advisory Committee in the 1970s. So what you're saying is like, oh, have sex with a 12-year-old so they can have a baby. And I know that they were doing that, and I know in some countries it still happens, but it ain't right. You're fucking that person over. But the ones doing it, do they care? No. Maybe they even had it happen to them, and it's a learned behavior. Well, it was okay if it happened to me, so it must be okay. But it's not. Average age of 14 for puberty in general, that was accepted as evidence by the Policy Advisory Committee in the 1970s. Golding's research has found that one girl in 6 hits puberty. One girl in 6 hits puberty at the age of 8. According to British, it's a lot of British, right? Not throwing shade, because the laws are going in, but it's happening in no matter what culture or background or religion or anything like that. According to British research conducted by the Centre for Family and Household Research in the 1990s, an increasing proportion of young people are sexually active below the age of consent. What are they watching? What are they being exposed to? Seriously. But people, you think it's okay, but it's not. And I'm not the only one that feels that way. Additionally, the UK's first National Survey of Sexual Attitudes and Lifestyles, NATSAL, abbreviation, which collected data up to 1990, found that a high proportion of young people engage in other forms of sexual activity prohibited by the law, including mutual masturbation and oral sex, beginning on average at the age of 14. Now, ask yourself, how many of those children were sexually molested or sexually abused or raped before that age? Because you'll find the biggest majority of them were. I became sexually active at a very young age because I was exposed to it. Waits also observed that qualitative research reveals a picture of many young people negotiating sexual behavior in a content of secrecy, contained by power relationships, while lacking confidence, resources, and support. He added, it is argued by some sexual health professionals that the age of consent should be lowered to facilitate more effective support for health and education services. Children should be more taught not to have sex at such a young age. It shouldn't be glorified. And I know that, the ones that are part of this are trying to block me, and it's like, public opinion. In November 2000, an internet poll of 42,000 girls aged 12 to 16 was conducted. 9 out of 10 respondents did not believe in waiting until marriage to have sex, while 80% said the age of consent should be lowered from 16. I guess it depends on who you ask, right? Or who's manipulating statistics. Because I'm not saying, because I know that, people don't usually wait until they're married. But they're not going out and they're having sex with people their own age for the most part. Unless, the older ones are grooming them, because my friend, her father tried grooming me. Meanwhile, he was fucking her and she was 12. Sexual education was criticized as outdated, uninformative, and taught too late. When children become curious about each other's bodies, that is when the parents need to sit down and talk with the children. But it's such a taboo conversation for most parents. A lot of parents, they don't want to have that conversation. It's very uncomfortable. So it's left to the schools to do that. And now parents are screaming about what's being taught in school. They're giving condoms out in school. So with little literature about sexually transmitted diseases, same-sex relationships, and how to deal with pregnancy. I was in grade 7. Half a year in grade 7, and I was 14 and a half. And I was being taught sexual education. I liked a boy. Well, he was a teenager too. And I got pregnant, and when I found out I was pregnant at 3.5 months, everyone in my class just stared at me, to the point where I started crying and I had to get up and leave, and the teacher come back in and said, don't do that. That she was a good teacher, because she spoke to the class and told the class that what they did was wrong. I ended up going to a school guidance counselor before I even went to my parents, because I was afraid to go to my parents. But we shouldn't be afraid to go to our parents. Our parents are the ones that we should be able to go to. Those surveys also said that free condoms should be provided in girls' toilets, and that the like euros, I think it is 60 million drive by the government to help teenage contraception would have been better spent on clinics for younger people wanting confidential advice. Exactly what I just said. But see, people think that, So I looked like that when I had my oldest. I was 16 there. I wasn't a grown woman. But my doctor did say the reason why I was able to carry such a big baby, because he weighed 8 pounds, 15 ounces, is because I understand the part that your body was developed. Mine just happened to develop quickly. But was it because it developed quickly because my mindset had to switch over and develop quickly, and I didn't have the chance to be a child? But I was ready to grow up. It's being taught. And does it bother me because I look back now at with my parents adopting him, and I look back now and I look at the damage that it caused me because of the decision I made? That's where we're supposed to be. When stuff like that happens, we're to be teaching our children. But I wasn't comfortable enough before I got pregnant. I wasn't comfortable enough to talk to my parents, or anyone for that matter, about sexual activity. Because at 13, I was taken downstairs by a 21-year-old man, and he had sex with me. And there was blood everywhere. And then he tried again. And I stood up and said, no. I had a couple friends there with me. And then when he got home, I had to send them out. I even talked to my friends at the age of 13 and told them what happened. See also adolescent sexuality in the United Kingdom, age of consent reform in Canada. Let's see what that says. Age of consent law in Canada refers to culture and legal decisions in Canada regarding the age of consent, which was raised in May 2008 as a part of the Tackling Violent Crime Act. This applies to all forms of sexual activity. In May 2008, the Canadian government, led by Stephen Harper, passed Bill C-22, introduced in February 2007 and received in August 2007, to raise the age of consent from 14 to 16, while creating a close in age exemption for sex between 14, 15-year-olds and partners less than the 5 years older. Exactly what I said. And keeping an existing close in age clause for sex between 12 to 13-year-olds and partners less than 2 years old. That innovative also maintains a temporary exemption for already existing marriages of 14 and 15-year-olds, but forbids new marriages like these in the future. See, I even like look back at my nanny and grandpa on one side of my family. I'll look back. And my nanny was 15. And my grandpa was 24 years older than her. Roughly. Did I look kindly on that? No. And people say, oh, well, it was happening then. Well, it shouldn't have been. Because it fucked over a lot of people. Section 159 of the Criminal Code set the age of consent for oral intercourse, for anal intercourse at 18 for non-married couples. In June 2019, Bill C-75 passed both houses of the Parliament of Canada and received royal assent, repealing Section 159 and making the age of consent equal at 16 for all types of intercourse. Okay. Use my own experiences, and some of my family might be embarrassed for me saying this, but I'm an older woman and I had anal sex and it fucking hurt. So can you imagine if it's a kid with an adult male or an adult female? I actually had a friend and we were playing Truth or Dare. And I took Dare. Person's not my friend, but they put a broom inside me. And I know that there was a lot of stuff happening in her home because her father took me in a room. And others of her friends, because she asked me one day and I told her. Then I ended up getting one of his computers and the stuff he had on his computer. We should have called the police, but we didn't. But a few years later, he was caught anyways. Because I was afraid. Prior to its repeal, Section 159 had been held unconstitutional by several courts, including 4 appellate courts, and was deemed unforeseeable. Or not unenforceable. Unenforceable. Previous 1890 law. In 1890, the age of consent was raised from 12 to 14. Battle against internet predators. We're actually dealing with one with that right now. My ex-husband was bringing someone here. And I kept telling him I didn't want him here. I was uncomfortable with him here. And just this past spring, summer, we found out that he was being charged for exactly this, and internationally too. Former Toronto Police Service officer Paul Gillespie, Gillespie, said the bill would give police more tools in the battle against internet predators. The intention of the bill is to target sexual predators and pimps. Other groups that support the increase in the age of consent were the National Council of Women of Canada, NCWC, the Canadian Family Action Coalition, CFAC, Canadian Crime Victim Foundation, CCVF, Beyond Borders Inc., and Canadians Addressing Sexual Exploitation, CASE. Case of Dale Eric Beckham. One of the motivators for the reform of these laws in Canada was the case of Dale Eric Beckham. In March 2005, Beckham, then 31 years old, traveled from his home to Woodlands, Texas, to Ottawa, Ontario, to meet with a 14-year-old boy he had met over the internet. The boy's parents, after observing him sneaking away in the middle of the night into a taxi, alerted the police, who tracked the cab to downtown hotel. Police found Beckham and the boy unclothed in a hotel room where they were engaged in sexual activity. It was later determined that the two had also engaged in sexual intercourse the previous night. Police also discovered hundreds of pornographic images of children on a laptop computer Beckham had brought with him from Texas. Beckham was arrested and held without bail. I know of somebody else, okay? They have pictures of their child, grandchild, what have you. And someone had made a comment about how sexy the 3-year-old was. Seriously. You know, it's the part of open your eyes and your hearts. Because if you think this is okay, I feel for you and I pray. Because something tells me that it happened to you and you think it's okay. But it never was. In Beckham's home state of Texas, the age of consent is 17. Now, I said about the guy who contacted me on POF. He went abroad to a country where the age limitation was 14 so he could fuck a child. I actually even put his picture up on the internet. See if I can find it. See, people are talking about what's been going around and said about your prime minister. What is it like? It's not okay for them to do it, but it's okay for someone else, right? It's not okay for anyone. I'm going to check. Ti sicuro po ti? Hala po to riesce, lo chissà, chissà tutto aí. For that picture that I was talking about. I know of other people, a lot of people that experienced sexual trauma. And it's not just with other people, it can be your family members or even your partners. That was the guy right there. He was doing it all the time, he said. So I posted this picture to Facebook. And held without bail. Now, see, when I was 9 and I was raped, my parents didn't find out till a year later. He was arrested. He got 2 years probation and had to see a psychiatrist. And then 7 years later went out and did it again to somebody else. But before he was able to, he got caught. But those people did nothing about it from my knowledge. In Beckham's home state of Texas, the age of consent is 17. And violators can face prison terms of up to 10 to 20 years. In Canada, sexual activity with teenagers as young as 14 was legal until May 2008, as long as it was consensual and the adult was not in a position of authority or dependency. The boy who reportedly suffered from social anxiety disorder and had shown signs of being suicidal insisted during interviews with the police that the sex with Beckham was consensual. Consequently, CONSEQUENTLY. I never said I could read well. The only crime, and I took law. The only crime, and I have access to the criminal code. Consequently, the only crime Beckham could be prosecuted for in Canada was a relatively minor offense of possession of child pornography. The predators have been protected, and it's time that stops. In November 2005, Beckham pleaded guilty and was sentenced to the time already served. He was then deported back to the United States. When I was 13, the 21-year-old that took me down to his room, for years he had been doing it, and then he got caught in 2012, I believe it was, 2012, 14, somewhere around there. And the same motive, only she was watching his child. Beckham pleaded, okay, back to the United States. After being notified of his arrest in Canada, Immigration and Custom Enforcement, ICE, agents searched Beckham's home in Woodlands, Texas, where they discovered a massive quantity of child pornography on his computer, with some depicting children less than 12 years old engaged in sexual acts with adults. After returning to the United States, Beckham was immediately arrested and held without bail. In July 2007, Beckham pleaded guilty to a federal charge of transporting child pornography to Canada. Although his lawyers argued unsuccessfully that Beckham's behavior was the result of diminished capacity. In November 2007, Beckham was sentenced to 17 years in prison to be followed by lifetime suspension or lifetime supervision. This case raised concerns that child molesters, not just in Canada, but also from abroad, were taking advantage of Canadians' low age of consent to sexually exploit vulnerable children while escaping criminal prosecution. LGBT rights activists criticized the bill because it did not address the issue of equality and maintained the then current Canadian age of consent for anal sex outside of marriage at 18. Hilary Cook, a spokeswoman for gay rights group EGALE Canada, EGALE Canada, stated the bill was an attempt to score partisan points. In June 2019, C-17 passed both houses of the Parliament of Canada and received royal assent, which repealed Section 159 effective immediately and made the age of consent equal at 16 for all individuals. The Canadian AIDS Society stated that increasing the age of consent could result in young people being more secretive about their sexual practices and not seeking out the information they needed. It's only because of the taboo that is put on being able to communicate with your parents. Parents should be communicating with their children from the time that they start experiencing sexual acts and ask them to explain why. What made them feel that way? Don't make them feel guilty or ashamed of it. Talk to them. Instead of leaving it up to a fucking system. And then you say, oh, well, the kids are like this. Well, it's because you allow a system to raise them instead of realizing that you're the one supposed to be teaching them this shit. And it's not, and I say this shit because, you're supposed to be teaching your children about their own bodies, about how to defend themselves. Talking with your children goes a long way. I wish my parents had to talk to me. Do I wish I never had my oldest son? No, I don't wish that. Seeking out the information they need. This will place youth at an increased risk of conducting HIV AIDS, and other sexually transmitted infections. Well, HIV and AIDS is coming from the adults being passed to children. And that's how it gets passed. So, you're saying that children getting AIDS and stuff like that? Have a gander at the adults. Because it's not the children that's the problem. The Canadian Children's Rights Council also referenced an article in the Globe and Mail raising concerns this would decrease the pursuit of condoms. See, they're not talked to about the responsibility of what comes with having intercourse. The proposal also received criticism from Adrian Cohen, Cohen, of the former pro-choice organization Canadian Federation of Sexual Health, formerly known as the Planned Parenthood Federation of Canada, who said that the organization believed that legislation did nothing to keep youth from harm. She talked on CTV News channels Mike Duffy Live, where she stated what it will do is infringe upon the rights of youth in terms of their ability to make decisions on their own sexuality. Is it that they're making the decisions, or are they being influenced? In 2007, her organization issued an official position statement. Peter Dudding, Dudding, Executive Director of the Child Welfare League of Canada, similarly characterized the bill's effect of removing judicial discretion in cases involving 14 to 15-year-olds. When we deal with arbitrary cutoffs, we lose the flexibility to apply the law in a much more significant and individual kind of way. See, these people are making up laws that make it that it's okay, because you know that saying, they know not what they say or do, but the adults do. Children do sometimes, but it's that part of a child's brain can be manipulated quite easily. So, age of consent in Europe, constitutional reform in the United Kingdom, French petitions against age of consent laws, statutory rape. Statutory rape. In common law jurisdictions, statutory rape is non-forcible sexual activity in which one of the individuals is below the age of consent, the age required to legally consent to the behavior. My parents were going to charge my oldest son's father for statutory rape, because when I got pregnant, I was 14 and a half and he had just turned 17. I actually looked at my baptism papers, And the day that I was baptized when I was little was the same day that I got pregnant. And see, the thing is, he had just turned 18 a month prior to me getting pregnant. When we found out I was pregnant, my parents were going to charge him for statutory rape. We were very close in age. And I told them that if they charged him for rape, because I liked him, they charged him for statutory rape, I was going to run away from home. He wasn't a grown, people say, well, he was 18, he was a grown. No, he was still a teenager. Whether he was considered an adult or not, he had just turned 18 a month prior to that. It's not like a 16-year-old with a 29-year-old. But some will think that's okay. I know that younger teenagers have sex, but it's the part of the influence. They start off as curiosity. But when they start doing actual sexual behaviors at a young age, that's when you should be fucking looking. Although it is usually refers to adults engaging in sexual conduct with minors under the age of consent, it is a generic term, and very few jurisdictions use the actual term statutory rape in the language of statutes. In statutory rape, overt force or threaten is actually not present. Statutory rape laws perform coercion because of a minor or mental disability. Adult is legally incapable of giving consent to the act. What I just said, coercion, grooming. And not only do they groom to the person right there, but they groom through the internet. And that's why it's like, you send your kids in your room, they're talking on these different platforms, and a lot of them are sending pictures. Adult is legally incapable of giving consent to the act. Different jurisdictions use many different statutory terms for the crime, such as sexual assault, rape of a child, corruption of a minor, unlawful sex with a minor, carnal knowledge of a minor, sexual battery, or simple carnal knowledge. The term child sexual abuse or child molestation may also be used. By statutory rape generally refers to sex between an adult and a minor past the age of puberty, and may therefore be distinguished for child sexual abuse, sexual relations with a pubescent child is typically treated as a more serious crime. Age of consent. In many jurisdictions, the age of consent is interrupted to mean mental or dysfunctional age. As a result, victims can be of any chronological age if their mental age makes them unable to consent to a sexual act. And I said, it doesn't matter the age. Consensual teenage sex is common in the United States. Consensual teenage between teenagers. See, I know people can go read this, but some people they don't. This was actually Spirit brought it to me. When I seen that video about Prince Charles and Princess Diana, it was even the public that was saying it's creepy. In many jurisdictions, the age of consent is interrupted to mean mental or dysfunctional age. As a result, victims can be of any chronological age. Okay. Consensual teenage sex is common in the United States. A 1995 study revealed that 50% of U.S. teenagers had sexual intercourse by the age of 16. What are they being exposed to? That's the thing. What are they being exposed to? Not only in the home, but outside of the home, on their phones, on their computers, when they're not being supervised. It's the part of children react to certain things. Sometimes it's because they're looking for a kind of affection. It is estimated that there are more than 7 million incidents of statutory rape every year. However, it is clear that most incidents are not prosecuted and do not lead to arrest or convictions. Laws vary in their definitions of statutory rape. And my question, no wonder the world's fucked up. Seriously, you're putting people in power that are making laws that work for them. And, ones like them. But see, as I said before, it's that part of having a gander at their childhood. Because I'm not saying it's okay. Statutory rape laws are based on the premises that an individual is legally incapable of consenting to sexual intercourse until that person reaches a certain age. The law mandates that even if he or she willingly engages in sexual intercourse, the sex is not consensual. Another rationale comes from the fact that minors are generally economically, socially, and legally unequal to adults. By making it legal for an adult to have sex with a minor, statutory rape laws aim to give the minor some protection against adults in a position of power over the youth. And as I said, there's a lot of people struggling with sexual abuse traumas. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter if you're a man, woman, however you refer to yourself. Another argument presented in defense of statutory rape laws related to the difficulty in prosecuting rape against a victim of any age in the courtroom, because forced sexual intercourse with a minor is considered a particularly heinous form of rape. These laws relieve the prosecution of the burden of proof lack of consent. This makes conviction more frequent in cases involving minors. See, the thing is, when you hear of things happening in a prison because somebody who was accused and went to jail for rape, molestation, what have you, a lot of the reason why things happen to them is because the ones that do it, they've probably had something happen to them or their children, because the first thing people think of is their own child. At least it's that part of, you should always be seeing your child. You should always be concerned with what your child's watching, what they're consuming. But I know that, the systems keep you busy. They say, oh, well, send them to us. We'll teach them everything they need to know. No. You need to be teaching them what they need to know. There's a lot of talk about what's in containers and everything like that. A lot of people saying, open the containers. And I agree that they should be open in those containers to appease people, because if it was food, well, that food's long spoiled. But see, they don't want to do that. And then that's where people need to start asking the question, why not? I've seen different things where in the UK, they found kids in a container. Seriously, people. Another argument presents in defense of statutory rape laws relates to the difficulty in prosecuting, because forced sexual intercourse in the minor considers a particular heinous. This makes convictions more involving minors. The original purpose of statutory rape laws was to protect young, unweaned females from males who might impregnate them and not take responsibility by providing support for the child. I was not allowed to talk with him, my oldest son's father. I was told I wasn't to talk to him anymore. He wanted to see him, but he wasn't allowed. This makes conviction more frequent. Responsibility by providing support for the children. In the past, the solution to such problems was often a shotgun wedding, a forced marriage called for by the parents of the girl in question. Okay. I know of somebody else. Okay. 3 months after they got in the relationship with the person, they became pregnant. 2 months after they had the baby, they got married. From my understanding, to the age of 18, the parents have to sign for the person to get married. And why are you allowing your child to get married at such a young age? Called for by the parents of the girl in question. This rational aims to preserve the marriageability of the girl and to prevent unwanted teenage pregnancy. And this is stuff that, you would have thought, like, you were talking about this happening like 2,000 freaking years ago. And here we are 2,000 years later and it's still fucking happening. Seriously, people. When's the world going to wake up? People go around with all lives matter. Every child matters. But why isn't that child mattering? Is it just are you wearing it just to fit in? Or are you wearing it because you truly believe it? Historically, a man could defend himself against statutory rape charges by proving that his victim was already sexually experienced prior to their encounter and thus not subject to being corrupted by the defendant. Just because they had sex before, it doesn't mean that it was something that they wanted to do again. A requirement that the victim be of previous chastity, character, remained in effect in some U.S. states until as late as the 1990s. Who used to use the chastity? I just heard Christian. Did you ever hear of Life with Billy? He used a chastity belt on his wife. Do you know the chastity, like you're having your period and everything in there, the infections? And I know people say, well, that's not what they're talking about. But that's what it was. It was to prevent you from having intercourse. It would go on the woman, but the man was able to go fuck as many people as they wanted. I even had my ex-husband tell me that that's okay. But a man can get a woman pregnant every 5 fucking minutes. Line up. Ting, 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 ting. Oh, pregnant. Ting, 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 ting. Oh, pregnant. But a woman can conceive in 1 year. They can get pregnant 9 months, have the baby, 11th month. After the baby's like a month old, they could get pregnant again. Maybe it's the men that need to have the chastity. Or maybe nobody, and just be responsible. Because I'm here to tell you it's both. Unwanted teenage pregnant, late 1990s. Sex differences in statutory rape. See, when I was 13, he was the babysitter and I was nervous. Because I had been raped before. I was asleep and I woke up to him kissing me. Female and male statutory rape. Until the late 1970s, sex involving an adult female and an estranged male was often ignored by the law due to the belief that it often constituted sexual intention of the younger male. This view still exists. I'm not saying it's not just men doing it, and boys doing it, or men doing it. It's women, it's younger teenage girls. It happens, both sexes. The view still exists, and yes, I heard more so with men, but it's how one perceives it and where you are. This view still exists in modern times, as there is a gender bias in courts on teacher-student sexual relations, resulting in a far lesser punishment of female offenders, which it should be no different. And like I said, I had a teacher made me feel very uncomfortable, a male teacher. And I wasn't the only female that he made uncomfortable. Accounting teacher. In 2005, the Office of Juvenile Justice of Delinquency Prevention estimated that 5% of statutory rape victims were male, and that 94% of the predators in these cases were female. See? 73% of the female predators were aged 21 or over, while 76% of the male victims were aged 15 or younger. I know somebody who had that done. It was his friend's mother. And they were 13 or thereabouts. See, at that age, you could almost, like some people would say, oh, well, that's cool. Seriously. It's not very, it's not very cool probably for the other person involved. A 2006 review of scientific research found that the majority of men who had sex with women as underage boys hold a positive reaction about the relationship, with a third of them being neutral and less than 5% being negative toward it. However, these men expressed slightly higher levels of psychological distress than men who had not had these experiences. That's what yes. The authors suggested that society views many disinclined men from recognizing negative or abusive elements of the relationships. In contrast, women who were involved with adult men when they were underage mostly had negative reactions once they left the relationship, seeing them as a sexual deviants who could not find willing same-age partners and who instead exploited young girls. U.S. courts have held that the male victims of statutory rape are liable for child support for any child resulting from the crime, on formally taking the view that the criminal act of the mother is irrelevant to a child support obligation. A lot of talk about abortion right now. And I've seen videos and I understand where both sides are coming from. So do I believe in abortion? I believe it depends on the circumstances. Because if you become pregnant from not taking the proper precautions, any abortion is the choice of the person who has it. They're the only ones that know their litigating circumstances. Where I feel abortion, and because a lot of women, sometimes they don't even find out till they're 3-4 months. I was 3 or 4 months along both times, like whenever I found out I was pregnant. No. But see, if I had been 13 and with the rape. See, the thing is, when people expect somebody to carry around a child in their body that was raped, they have that constant, it's that part of that constant reminder. So what that person is experiencing, that child experiences it too. Do I agree with the way they do it? No, I don't. But I also believe that the person shouldn't feel obligated and guilted into carrying a reminder in their own body of what they experienced, because then they begrudge that child and that child feels it. So it's up to the person. And if people come in and they don't like what I'm saying, I know that people say like it's not right. And I totally understand where you're coming from. But it's not your choice. And there should be more safety measures involved. Because I know what people are saying about what happens to aborted babies. And I do believe that it should be up to a certain part of the trimester. But sometimes if it's a certain, then it's, that person just don't want the reminder of what happened to them. In pregnancy, it should be more talking with the person to be able to talk and give them a better understanding of what they experienced through it, what they could experience afterwards. Because I know that, like, I had 2 miscarriages. My first miscarriage was for twins. And it played a toll on me because of my blood type. I had gone to the doctor and told them that I was bleeding some and spotting, and I needed a specific needle. But they told me to go home. You're going to lose the baby anyway. So I was one that wanted the baby, but they wouldn't help me to keep it. Okay. Child support obligation. In many cases, the boys were not characterized as victims, but as willing participants. Courts often rely on the consent of the victim of the sexual intercourse when imposing child support orders, even though within the context of statutory rape prosecutions, minors are deemed legally incapable of giving consent. County of St. Louis, Obispo versus Nathaniel J. examined the case of a 15-year-old male victim and a 34-year-old woman predator where the sexual assault resulted in the birth of a child. When questioned, the male victim stated that the child was a mutually agreeable act. The 34-year-old predator was prosecuted and convicted of unlawful sex with a minor. However, the lawsuit in question demanded child support from the male victim for the child who was born. The court found that the boy was not an innocent victim and had responsibilities to the child, despite the fact that he had been the victim of a sexual assault and had been of the age of consent. The court had not been on the age of consent. The court ruled that the victim would be responsible for child support once he reached the age of maturity. Wow. So, according to that, the victim and a lot of people are saying, like, even on like the victims, they stand up for themselves and victims get punished and the predators or aggressors go free, right? Same-sex statutory rape. In some jurisdictions, relationships between adults and minors are penalized more when both are the same sex. For example, in the U.S. state of Kansas, if someone 18 or older has sex with a minor no more than 4 years younger, a Romeo and Juliet law limits the penalty substantially. Somebody just said how you feel about same-sex marriages. You know, if you love them, you love them. So if somebody wants to say, well, because you think that way, you're not of God, fuck you. God is love. Love is God. Love is the infinite energy. And, you know, as written, however, this law did not apply to same-sex couples, leaving them subject to higher penalties than opposite-sex couples for the same offense. This resulted in higher statutory rape convictions, larger fines, and sex offenders registration for teens involved in same-sex statutory rape. Because some of those same people that will ridicule somebody for same-sex relationships or sexual activity, they probably tried it themselves at least once. But because of the stigmata about it, you know, and that's where you get the fucking uproar from everybody. The Kansas law was success, and I'm not talking about like what somebody just said, transgender. I'm not talking about that. I already told my feelings about that. You don't have to fucking cut your tits off or your like take hormone pills or anything like that to grow them or cut your penis off. Be comfortable in your own skin and realize that you're experiencing two-spirited. You're experiencing masculine, feminine. The Kansas law was successfully challenged as being in conflict with the U.S. Supreme Court rulings Lawrence versus Texas and Romer versus Evans. The Lawrence present did not directly address equal protection, but its application in the case of State versus Lumen invalidated age of consent laws that discriminate based on sexual orientation in Kansas. No, I don't pick sides because I see all sides of it. I see where people are coming from because I look past the mask and I don't let somebody else make my decisions for me. or tell me how I'm supposed to think because, they don't understand it or they don't see it that way. The law reads, okay, in Denmark. Okay, specific laws depending on countries. Denmark. The law reads in Danish. Det som har ned in børn under 14 or 15 er straffes, men jeg skulle han kan hisse på det which translates roughly to section 222. I'd like to know what that angel number means. One who has sexual intercourse with a child under the age of 15 shall be punished by imprisonment for up to 8 years unless the situation is covered by 216 paragraph 2 in determining the penalty. It shall be an aggravating circumstance if the predator has gained intercourse by exploiting their physical and mental superiority. And that's what I said. Prince Charles was 29. He was a prince. He was of authority. He was somebody the public had looked up to. And he was with a 16-year-old. Whether it was of legal consent, to be of legal consent or not, he was still a man of power. Paragraph 2. If the offender has, and anyone like him, not just him, I'm using it as using them as an example because they're supposed to be the example to the people. If the offender has gained intercourse by coercing or threats, the penalty may be increased to imprisonment for up to 12 years. The consent or the content of 216 paragraph 2 specifies the penalty can be increased to 12 years if the child is under the age of 12. That's in Denmark. Italy. In Italy, the age of consent is 14. A Romeo and Juliet rule applies for an age difference of 1 year. However, if the older person has a position of authority over the younger, such as a relative, teacher, parish priest, or doctor, the same age of consent is 16. Shouldn't those people know better? Those people in authority. The Netherlands, Article 244. A person who, with a person younger than 12 years, performs indecent acts comprising or including sexual penetration of the body will be punished with imprisonment up to 12 years or a fine up to that of a 5th category. You're fucking a child. Am I derogatory? I had somebody tell me sometimes you got to speak their language, but then they still think it's okay. Article 245, a person who, out of wedlock with a person who has reached the age of 12 but has not reached 16 years, performs indecent acts comprising or including sexual penetration of the body is liable to a term of imprisonment up to 8 years, or a fine up to that of a fifth category, of the fifth category. Think about who's setting these laws. Because any parent in their right mind that condones this, if the shoe fit, like if it seems like I'm throwing shit, well, if the shoe fits, wear it, because you should know better. Especially when it's happened. It's not normal. And, I don't care who says it is. I experienced it. I can't go back and change my life. But I can help others. Note on marriage, Article 45, dealing with sex with persons between 12 and 16 years only applies outside of marriage. However, a marriage with someone under 16 requires authorization for the Minister of Justice, which can only be obtained if there are compelling reasons for such a marriage. How can there ever be compelling marriage? Seriously. These are the people you put in charge. Notes of the Dutch law. I'm looking out for the children. And others like me are too. And they're screaming. And people that don't want to look at the truth are turning a blind eye. And then wondering why your kids are the way they are. Dutch law. Sexual penetration is not only sexual intercourse. The object does not even necessarily have to be a penis or other body part. Giving cunnilingus, receiving fellatio, and active French kissing can be considered rape as well. A fine is seldom given to a case of severe crimes, such as statutory rape. In nearly all cases, the committer is condemned to prison. Fines are divided into categories. The higher number the category is, the higher is the fine. The maximum fine of the fifth category is 83. See, the thing is, in some countries, wives are getting raped by their husbands. Children are getting raped by their parents. And women are capable of raping husbands as well, or even same-sex marriages or relationships. Category is 83,000 euros. Consent of the minor and the use or absence of violence is not a crediation. Criterion. If the other is minor, it is statutory rape. The maximum punishment depends on whether the victim is younger than 12 years. Then it is up to 12 years imprisonment, or older than 12 years. The imprisonment will be up to 8 years. I'll say it again, you're having sex with children. And the ones that are protecting them, he said, hey, for England and Wales, the legal framework of the Sexual Offence Act 2003, differences between sexual contact with children under 13 and sexual contact with those at least 13 but under 16. This is United Kingdom. Sexual penetration of a child under 13 is termed rape of a child under 13, an offense created by Section 5 of the Act, which reads, my channel is a spirit to spirit. Some understand my channel and others don't. So sexual penetration of a child under 13 is termed, this is the United Kingdom. Rape of a child under 13. A person commits an offense if he intentionally penetrates the vagina, anus, or mouth of another person with his penis and the other person is under 13. Women still have a penis. They just call it a clitoris. It's the penis that didn't grow. The explanatory notes read, whether or not the child consented to this act is irrelevant. The term rape is used with regard to children under 13. Consensual sex penetration of a child above 13 but under 16 is defined as sexual activity with a child and punishable less several Section 9, which requires the predator to be 18 or over. A minor can also be guilty of sexual contact with another minor, Section 13, but the explanatory notes state that decisions whether to prosecute in cases where both parties are minors are to be taken on a case-by-case basis. The Crown Prosecution Guidelines state, this is the United Kingdom, it is not in the public interest to prosecute children who are of the same or similar age and under the engage in sexual activity, where the activity is truly consensual for both parties and there are no aggravating features such as coercion or corruption. Northern Ireland follows a similar legal framework under the Sexual Offences Northern Ireland Order 2008. This act overhauled the sexual offences laws in Northern Ireland and fixed the age of consent at 16 in line with the rest of the UK. Prior to this act, it was 17. In Scotland, the Sexual Offence Scotland Act 2009 also fixes an age of consent of 16. And it is also two-tiered, treating children under 13 differently than children 13 to 15. Section 18, rape of a young child, applies to children under 13. Before the enactment of this act, Scotland had very few statutory sexual offenses, with most of its sexual legislation being defined as common law, which was increasingly seen as a problem, in particular for the issue of consent. The creation of a two-tier age limit was deemed very important during the drafting of the act. I'm going to ask you again, who's making these laws? And who are you finding out that are more so hurting your children, kidnapping your children, abducting your children or your family members, trafficking them? Romeo and Juliet laws. Often teenage couples engage in sexual conduct as part of an intimate relationship. This may occur before either participant has reached the age of consent, or after one has, but the other has not. In the latter case, in most jurisdictions, the person who has reached the age of consent is guilty of statutory rape. In some jurisdictions, if two minors have sex with each other, they are both guilty of engaging in unlawful sex with the other person. The act itself is prima facie evidence of guilt when other participant is incapable of legally consenting. Many jurisdictions have passed so-called Romeo and Juliet laws, which serve to reduce or eliminate the penalty of the crime in cases where the couple's age difference is minor and the sexual contact would not have been rape if both partners were legally able to give consent. Such laws vary, but can include rephrasing the definition of the offense itself to completely exclude situations where the difference in age is less than a specific time period. Providing an affirmative defense to statutory rape based on the small differences in participants' ages or on evidence of pre-existing sexual relations between the accused and the perceived victim that did not constitute statutory rape. Both parties were underage when the relationship started. See, people will say, like, why are you coming in and reading? Well, I scroll through TikTok and I see other people, they're reading out of different books and everything like that. Se por eso la quisiera, que tu putu. I totally understand this because I've been through it. I had one girl tell me back years ago that she had sexual intercourse, anal sexual intercourse with her partner. And it became very exciting to the point where pulled out and pushed back in. I actually had somebody do that. And it fucking drove me up to the headboard because it hurt that bad. This girl ended up being torn. She had to go get stitches. Reducing the severity of the offense from a felony to a misdemeanor, which prevents loss of civil rights and reduces available penalties. See, if my family's watching or what have you, and you feel embarrassed for what I'm bringing forward, I have to ask you, why are you the one embarrassed? What, because I'm able to speak about this stuff? Addressing elephants in the room and having no shame for being able to talk about what I experienced, what I did, what I've been through? Reducing the penalty in such cases to a fine, probation, or community services. Eliminating the requirement that the convicted participant registers as a sex offender, or reducing the duration of such registration from life to 1, 5, or 10 years. Allowing a convicted party to petition for expurgement after serving an unjusted sentence. expungement after serving any justed sentence. Such laws generally apply to a couple whose ages differ by less than a specific number of years. They are, however, generally unavailable in any case when the older participant has an authoritative position over the younger, regardless of relative age, such as a teacher, student, coach, player, or guardian. Weird relationships. Okay, we're going through that right now. Teachers are being charged, coaches are being charged, even in like your little leagues and in the hockey itself with the bigger boys or girls. Or if any physical force was used or serious physical injury resulted. And I just said that about the girl being torn and about me being driven. Like it hurts so bad. This is normally accomplished by making acts involving these circumstances separate crimes to which the Romeo and Juliet defense does not apply. An example is Texas Penal Code, Section 22.011. It provides an affirmative defense to a charge of sexual assault if all of the following apply. The accused was not more than 3 years older than the perceived victim. The perceived victim was older than 14 years of age at the time of the offense. Age consent in Texas is 17 years. The accused was not at the time registered or required to register for life as a sex offender. The conduct did not constitute incest. Neither the accused nor perceived victim would commit bigamy by marrying the other. In other words, neither was married to a third person. A similar affirmative defense exists in the Texas Penal Code for the related crime of continuous sexual abuse of a younger child or children. Any defense under either law, however, does not apply to the separate crime of improper educator-student relationships. Sexual relations between a licensed teacher or a school employee and a student of the same school, or for aggravated sexual assault, the foreseeable rape statute of Texas law. Some countries other than the United States also have Romeo and Juliet laws. Ireland, 2006 law has been contested because it treats girls differently from boys. In Canada, the age of consent is normally 16, but there are two close in age exceptions. Sex with minors age 14, 15 is permitted if the partner is less than 5 years older, and sex with minors aged 12 to 13 permitted if the partner is less than 2 years older. Sex at a young age is not easy for anyone. You grow up in many different ways. Some just fine. But is that part of What are we exposing our children to? And allowing somebody of authority to say, oh, it's okay for them to have sex, to somebody much older. Oh, permit if the partner is less than 5 years in sex. Okay. Other countries state that the sexual conduct with the minor is not to be punished if the partners are of similar age and a development. For instance, the age of consent in Finland is 16, but the law states that the act will not be punished if there is no great difference in the age or the mental and physical maturity of the persons involved. Another approach takes the form of a stipulation that sexual intercourse between a minor and an adult is legal. It says is legal under the condition that the latter does not exceed a certain age. In Slovenian, okay. Slovenia, please excuse me if I didn't pronounce that right. Slovenia, the age of consent is 15, but the activity is only deemed criminal if there is a marked discrepancy between the maturity of the predator and that of the victim. Current issues. While there is broad support for the concept of statutory rape as criminal in the United States, there is substantial debate on how vigorously such cases should be pursued and under what circumstances. In May 2006, the Irish Supreme Court found the existing statutory rape laws to have been unconstitutional since they prevented the defendant from entering a defense that he had reasonably believed that the other party was over the age of consent. And I know that younger people lie about their age. But it's up to the older person. This has led to the release of persons held under the statutory rape law and has led to public demands that the law be changed by emergency legislation being enacted. On June 2nd, 2006, the Irish Supreme Court upheld an appeal by the state against the release of one such person. Mr. A and Mr. A was rearrested shortly afterwards to continue serving his sentence. In the aftermath of the December 2007 disclosure by then 16-year-old U.S. actress Jamie Lee Spears, the sister of the pop star Britney Spears, that the father of her baby was 18-year-old Cassie Aldridge, something like that, Aldridge. There was talk of the prosecution of Aldridge for statutory rape, which could be done under current Louisiana state law. Prosecution in the case was never pursued. See, there's a lot of talk about like what's happening in the world with regards to child trafficking. And it's not just child trafficking. It's like it's happening to all ages. And when I see that, you think that the age of 12 or 13, even looking in here, that they wanted to have at the age of 4, you're having sex with a baby. But some won't see it that way. And that's where there is, I'm going to say it's a mental health issue in that, in retrospect to that. It's something within the brain itself, because of the experiences that that person may have experienced themselves. And it became normal. Grew up in a society like that thought that way. And it's not because I'm throwing shade on you. I don't believe it to be right. I believe that the parents should be responsible and talk to the children about sexual behaviors. It's not to shame them. It's asking them about their feelings. Asking them about what it is they're experiencing. Because like I said, a lot of these young people, they're looking for something. They're looking for affection, acceptance, and I know to say they feel it feels good. But I do know that after it happens, some of them, they feel like, why? Why'd I do it? There are many people that, like I said, would look at me and figure, well, why would you come on and do that? It's because there's a lot of talk of it going on right now. Epstein, P. Diddy. People even said that Trump was guilty of it. Your other prime minister or president that was going up, Biden's son. You're saying all this stuff. People are even saying that the Prime Minister of Canada. But it's, you're looking out there, but are you also looking in your own home? And I'll tell you right now, the ones that make excuses and say, oh, well, they didn't know then. You're fucking right. They knew better then. If the wind will not serve, take to the oars. And then if somebody is defending that behavior, I have to ask, are you defending it because you were one of those people? Man is always more than he can know himself. Thus, his accomplishments will always come as a surprise to him.
Yeah. Elle écoute pequeño. Eso le sé, es su kitui, ki tataina, and no kutupri. Grow along with me, the best is yet to be. And these like people that will defend this, some of those people, it's because it has happened to them. And a lot of people are afraid to speak up about it. That's Pandora's box. That's the taboo. That's the hope down here. And hope is screaming to come up. That inner child is in need of your help. There may be younger people that, would get frustrated with me saying this, but, like that, the 17-year-old coming in. My channel is not for people under the age of 18. Because I bring forward a lot of different stuff. And it's not for children's ears. What I bring forward, it's then if the parents want their children to understand it or, what have you, that's up to the parents. So with that being said, I'm sending you all much love, light, many blessings, most importantly, very good health to anyone and everyone wanting, willing to receive and accept. I want you all to be big, bold, brave. And most importantly, be yourself, be your authentic self, be true to yourself, be true to others, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and know that you have more strength than you can comprehend at times. It's that part of now. It's time to speak up and speak out. It's time for voices to be heard and to stand up for the children. Because whether you realize it or not, or whether your children act out and you feel like they don't need you, they need us more than what you can really understand. It's not about not letting them grow up. It's about what are we teaching them? What are we exposing them to? That being said, love you all. Have a great week.